Norwich, Splinter.
For all of the things that Splinter can and will be praised about, this machine could have made the list purely on the basis of that fight against Hypnodisc. If that was Splinter's only fight ever, it was still involved in a big enough bloodbath to grant it entry. However, as mentioned, Splinter is in its own right a very solid machine. Well, solid for the most part that was. Splinter's debut campaign in Series 4 was a pleasant surprise, as its interesting sidearms and axe combination proved effective in controlling fights, helping it collect a victory over the experienced Kilohertz and smothering Eric expertly to join in with some big names for the series semi-finals. As we know, Splinter was then smashed into next Sunday by Hypnodisc, but at least team member Stuart Waitman didn't take it badly, nonchalantly stating that they were going to build another one anyway. And to their credit, build another one they did, and to a very solid standard as well. Splinter came back rebuilt for the 100kg era of the show with a noticeably more sturdy front plough, and it was in the Extreme Annihilator where it proved that it wasn't cannon fodder when it was in with the big boys, as it outlasted Thermidor 2 and Exterminator, as well as even Hypnodisc itself. Splinter's mini revenge of Hypnodisc was quite typical of Splinter as a whole really, very under the radar, not exactly something you notice all that much, but all in all, still a very good fighter, and one that through its gruesome death and plucky performances in general, opens up our top 50.
And can't get any momentum to come in on a drive to get the axe working. And at the moment it's Splinter doing all the work here.
From me, concussion.
One of my favourite things about watching Robot Wars is the teams that were created by fans who just wanted to have a go. Daniel, Kira and Cat 3, for example, went up to become all-stars just from watching the early series at home, and even the all-time greats such as the minds behind Razor were inspired from watching the very earliest series. But the reboot era was a very different time, where heavyweights were no longer built from recycled goods, and most if not all were either built from veterans with years of experience or people with a ton of resources to build the best robots possible. It really seemed like novices had no place beyond the first run mayonnaise of the series. But that's precisely what made Concussion's success so much more impactful. Debuting in Series 9, captained by the now fan favourite Roboteer Tim Rackley, Concussion boasted a very powerful and promising drum spinner, which in this country was rare to see and even rarer to see do well, especially at the time. It was manufactured by Simon Scott of Team Razor, which caused many to take this single fact as a sign that this robot would be one to remember, as it was placed in possibly the most open heat of the series, giving many a time to shine, and shine Concussion did. Winning 4 fights before even reaching the heat final, Concussion bested reigning 4th place 4 before moving on to the grand final. Returning in Series 10, while it may not have reached the same lofty heights that it did the series before, it still put up a good fight and had many memorable battles, even if some of them were losses. To a fair few people, Concussion is more than a good drum that made a heat final at one time, but it's proof that fans could turn off their TV and build a heavyweight without being doomed to a one-hit KO. Concussion may not have been around long enough to be a true staple of the show, but its success brought some much needed inspiration to budding Roboteers and a breath of fresh air at just the right time.
They can't drum up and a pound get away, they get off! They flip Thor with the mighty power of the drum! What a turn up! What a turn up! What a battle that is! One of the best we've seen this series!
Stupid Jake.
Jason is gobsmacked! Brilliant stuff! Wow, they awoke from their concussion.
From Bromley in Kent, Kilotron.
When people think about a potential design for a combat robot, I very much doubt they think of a fluorescent pink wheelie bin lid. Well, that's exactly what Richard Broad did think of when building Kilotron. The robots featured in the early days of Robot Wars were much different from what they are today. Back then, robots were made out of road signs, old microwaves, and recycled scrap. But even back then, the idea of a pink wheelie bin lid on 6 wheels was a design that raised a few eyebrows. The paint job alone glued it into the memories of many fans of the show. However, the paint job wasn't the only thing that got people talking. Kilotron was also armed with a deadly pickaxe, making it one of the most feared robots in the first 2 series. Sure, by today's standards, Kilotron's axe doesn't really hold up, but at the time, Kilotron was hailed in the same regard as Dominator 2 and Terahertz would be years later. This pickaxe proved that everyone's fears were justified, taking Kilotron to the Series 2 Grand Finals, placing 4th overall. Or 3rd, depending on who you ask in Series 4. Rather ironically, Series 2 was the only time in which Kilotron did not sport its usual flamboyant pink paint job, but instead opting for a shade of orange, simply because Richard accidentally bought the wrong paint. And here we were thinking there was a technical reason behind it. Unfortunately, due to a conflict of schedules, Kilotron did not return for Series 3 and instead returned for Series 4, by which time it was heavily outdated, losing in the second round after being flipped effortlessly by Wheelie Big Cheese. It was still great to see the Pink Predator back in the arena though, even if it was only for a brief time. All in all, Kilotron may have had an uncouth appearance, but it showed people that a robot didn't need to be built out of the finest materials and painted grey to do well. All you need is a bit of flamboyance and a deadly weapon and you can go a long way. And considering Kilotron was such a driving force in the earlier series, it would be unfair to say that they weren't one of the robots that popularised the show.
A hop, skip and a jump. Kilotron, but survival, look at that for damage! Well, slicing down through, penetrating the Dexian shell of Behemoth. And again, looking to cause major damage here, slicing down through. Digging out a V-shaped crevice in the front of Behemoth. Kilotron well on top here. And pulling, and rocking, and rolling, and toppling! And it's Kilotron through!
From Wallington in Surrey, Supernova.
One of the rising stars of Robot Wars' latter half, Supernova emerged onto our screens with destruction and innovation unthinkable when you look at its predecessor, Oblivion. Supernova boasted an enormous 22-kilogram disc that made it a real spectacle to watch in battle, as the gyroscopic forces of its own insane weapon would send it twisting and reeling all over the arena. And that's not to say the opponent would be off scot-free. Anything but the most robust of construction would be obliterated. And exposed wheels? Forget about them. Don't bring them into the arena with Supernova. In their debut fight, Supernova fought the experienced Behemoth and proved a daunting threat, causing far more damage to Behemoth than even Hypnodisc could manage. However, all that power and entertainment came at a cost. Despite that, Supernova, without even winning its fight, proved itself as a potential Robot Wars success story. Returning for Series 6, Supernova made mincemeat of its foes and stole the mantle of Heat favorite from the overshadowed Spawn again. Ultimately, it fell short of the build-up after an awkward blade-first landing bent Supernova's drive shaft in the Heat final. It returned for the 7th Wars, seeking out its first Heat win, and although a targeted slam from Storm 2 took Supernova out of the main competition early, it still got to take apart Mayhem and even Sir Killalot's tracks before its defeat. But what many people really remember them for is their run in the 3rd World Championship. Representing Sri Lanka, Supernova quashed the hopes of 4 other countries with destructive victories and closed out the show's original run with a 2nd place finish. Its controversial 2nd defeat against Storm 2 being the last fight we would see on Robot Wars for over 12 years. Once the long wait was over, Supernova returned for the reboot as one of the show's most experienced competitors, and had the potential to truly solidify itself as the all-star we all wanted it to be. Unfortunately, the Supernova that was once so ahead of its time was now somewhat out of date, shearing off its weapon teeth and riding into the pit on the surface of its own weapon. This prompted a full redesign of Supernova for Series 9, where it carried out one of the most visceral destruction displays of the reboot by obliterating Frostbite. But as opponents Pulsar and Ironside 3 had advanced just that little bit further, Supernova's final campaign came to a close. Supernova's terrifying reputation in Robot Wars was well earned, as they never came at an opponent with anything less than all guns blazing and little concern for recoil. That recklessness often got them into trouble, but let it never be said that the audience wasn't hoping for every one of their hits to land true.
They're still going. The lights stay bright, but there's no one at home. Oh dear. Supernova, look at the power of the weaponry. Once, twice, smithereens.
From Arley in Worcestershire, Atomic.
Built by a team of Worcestershire farmers, the distinctive yellow and red flipper Atomic had a roller coaster of a journey. Atomic for many years was the perennial underachiever of Robot Wars and one of the most unlucky contestants in the show. How many robots can claim they had to face the defending champion twice in their first ever heat, press on nevertheless, and be rewarded with a second round clash against Hypnodisc the very next year? Everything about Atomic's formative years said give up or this is a grown man's club, from being the only seed in history to fight another seed in the second round, to being forced to withdraw from the Annihilator it had done so well to qualify for because it had taken so much damage. To really twist the knife, Atomic failed to qualify for Series 6, and it seemed as though the once promising machine would fade from our screens without one last chance at the title. That is, of course, until the 7th Wars. The embodiment of third time's the charm, Atomic finally showed us what it was capable of, taking its heat by storm and making a complete mockery of the seeded Smidsy. Atomic amassed a record-breaking 4 consecutive out-of-the-arena flips on its way to the top 8, where it would come so tantalisingly close to flipping the eventual champion Typhoon 2, but one split-second mistake yet again saw it relegated to being champion cannon fodder. But not all was lost. Gone were the days of Atomic being fed to the Robot Wars elites. Now, Atomic was one of the elites. Even to this day, Atomic is still regarded as one of Robot Wars' strongest machines from its original run, and had we seen an 8th series back in 2004, I think we were looking at a real contender for the grand final, perhaps even the champion itself.
No one remembers a Robot Wars loser. M2 perilous. Atomic has them in there. Oh, they need to get their blade down. There, and now flip. That's it. M2 gone.
From Cannock in Staffordshire, Bulldog Breed.
The main character in a story very similar to Atomic's, Bulldog Breed had slightly better success from more opportunities, but for a long time was unable to truly break through to the big leagues. Bulldog Breed's first campaign was a learning curve that Tony Summerfield would probably like to forget. And by the time Bulldog Breeds 2 and 3 began to rack up the win tally, good flippers were clogging the series and fighting for limited fans, seedings, and spots in the series semi-finals. It was an uphill battle for Bulldog Breed, who seemed destined for mid-tier status. Not only could they not get a response about Series 5 seedings, but they drew Hypnodisc in 2 successive heats, a fate no other robot ever had to endure. With 4 wars under their belts and success slipping further from their grip, Tony Summerfield received a call from the producers suggesting a tag team partnership with RoboChicken, which he accepted for a laugh. But fate was finally smiling on Bulldog Breed, and if ever a good omen has appeared on the show, it's drawing a cat against a hungry dog in the first round. As Bulldog Breed fired its flipper on the reigning champion Pussycat, all its fortunes seemed to change. Bulldog Breed's campaign in the Extreme 2 Tag Team Terror is one of the most dominant performances in Robot Wars history, almost single-handedly winning the tournament. It would finally receive the elusive seeding in Series 7, and with no Hypnodisc to stop it, broke into the top 8, before finally falling to a different spinner altogether. Bulldog Breed's determination was a credit to the team's perseverance, and it was terrific to see it succeed at the end after so many years of trying.
Pussycat thrown into the air there, has fought in 5 UK domestic championships. Can run any way up. Pussycat, but not that way. Thank you very much. You're out. How many lives on a Pussycat? 1. And it's over. In went the Bulldog Breed. Up went the flipper. Out went the cat.
From Chadwell Heath in Essex, 259.
Long before the vertical spinner started to dominate robotic combat all around the world, Robot Wars saw one of the true pioneers of the big vertical disc, which still stands as an inspiration to this day. Built by Robot Wars veteran Adam Clark for his 5th series on the show, 259 earned its name because Clark's son would say 259 instead of 3-2-1 at the start of the fight. 259 frightened many opponents in the pits during Series 6 thanks to its awesome looking weapon. I mean, just look at it. Imagine spending hours upon hours building a robot and then you see yourself facing a machine that looks like that. To hardly anyone's surprise, 259 made an immediate impact, just obliterating Infernal Contraption in its first round before dominating Wild Thing in the opening stages of its second fight. Sadly for 259, Wild Thing has always been built like a brick, and reliability let Adam Clark's robot down, to the disappointment of many, including Jonathan Pierce, who quoted it as being a potential champion. While the enormous spinner did indeed prove powerful across its battles, 259 was forced to sacrifice defense, which proved its undoing against Fluffy in its final appearance. 259 may well have been the definitive glass cannon of Robot Wars, wielding one of the most devastating spinners of the classic era, but having poor reliability and weak armour to go with it. It's a shame we only saw 4 battles out of it, but the fact it is so high on the list with just 4 fights shows what sort of impact this robot had on the fanbase, and for that spinner alone, 259 will be remembered for a long time to come.
259, bunching and bruising into Wild Thing, tossing it over and over and over. Look at this. This is determined destructibility from 259. Dog with a bone there.
From Dartford Girls Grammar School, Napalm.
Armoured in papier-mâché and spiderwebs, Napalm spent its whole life looking like a healthy sneeze could blow it to smithereens. Instead, Napalm would become the most disproportionately successful robot in the history of the show. While fans would call Napalm a terrible machine with no business being in the war zone, and toward the end its team would certainly agree, that advice was apparently never given to opponents like Gemini or Warhog, who were given the one-time semi-finalist as a cannon fodder opponent only to come off second best. Napalm's single semi-final campaign was fraught with controversy. Its heat final against Demolition Demon is considered one of the worst judges' decisions in history, only for its elimination in the semi-final to be infamously controversial for other reasons. The legends behind Napalm, teacher David Crosby and students Claire Greenaway and Vicky Allgood, were some of the best sports in the show, always down for a laugh about their improbable success. Claire Greenaway was notable in being the first female roboteer to complete the gauntlet and to reach the semi-finals. Well, when David Crosby wasn't stealing the controls, that is. Napalm would come back year after year with barely a coat of paint, damage from the previous series still visible, showing off its battered titanium plough and clanging mandible weapons. If Razor was a hybrid of a bird and a reptile, Napalm was a hybrid of a cockroach and a worm. You can stomp on it, but it survives all the same.
They've gone. They've had a disastrous time in Robot Wars Extreme, haven't they? John and Carol Udall and young Robert, the 12-year-old. So Gemini, wobble, wibble, wobble, wibble, wobble. Is it going to be Napalm with victory on a plate? Because Gemini are being counted out by the ref bot. Well, somehow Napalm has contrived an unbelievable victory without hardly doing anything. How on earth did that happen?
From Hinckley in Leicestershire, 13 Black.
Everyone loves a good spinner, but what if instead of one spinner, you had 2? That was the question John Denny asked himself, and the answer? 13 Black. With its outstanding roulette table theme, 13 Black instantly marked itself out, and while it rolled snake eyes in its ill-fated Series 5 debut, it was shooting straight 6s in its next appearance. Chomp-a-Lot got cut out, and Double Trouble was shown that there was only room for one dual spinner in that arena, but it was the seeded Stinger who proved to be 13 Black's biggest scalp claimed. Despite outlasting the vicious Fluffy, the former grand finalist was overwhelmed by the dual discs of death, and 13 Black became one of only 2 unseeded semi-finalists in the series. Their semi-final run saw no further victories, but it did see them invent one of the most unusual methods of locomotion ever seen in Robot Wars, as it head spun its way around the arena. 13 Black had made enough of a name for itself to compete in a truly stacked All-Stars competition in Extreme 2, up against champs like Razor and Chaos 2, and the nigh on impenetrable Dominator 2, and 13 Black nearly went all the way. They ripped Chaos 2's flipper in half, beat out Dominator 2 with a little help from Matilda, and even put a dent in Razor. And anyone familiar with Razor's record in Robot Wars will know how rarely that occurs. Sadly, despite a well-earned high seeding, a deep Series 7 run was not to be. In a series so flipper-heavy, their inability to self-right was always going to be a problem, especially when they found themselves the victim of probably the nastiest of the new flippers in Gravity. 13 Black wasn't always the most powerful spinner, but it was certainly one of the most unique. Its innovative, great-looking design baffled opponents and ingratiated it to many, and assured it a place on this list.
13 Black, surely to... How can you smile when you've worked so hard on your machine? What are they doing out there? It's great fun. All that work. Great stuff. In defeat a smile and some sort of dance. Yeah, well the slogan is Spin to Win, coined by the Hypnodisc Rose family originally, and the Wild Thing team and the 13 Black boys heading out of the series semi-final.
From Colchester in Essex, Steel Avenger.
Perhaps the poster child for the mid-tier robots, the Steel Avenger was one of the most prominent all-round veterans that never reached remarkable heights. The Willoughbys reached 2 heat finals but never came close to winning a heat. They also placed second in a tag team tournament but arguably cost its team the final decision, won a Best Engineered award but was never seen as an inspiration or innovation, and wielded a respectable axe weapon that was still ultimately a far distance away from the likes of 4 Terahertz and Dominator 2. But it is the Steel Avenger's longevity that makes it stand out. It was one of the few non-semi-finalists to chalk up 10 combat victories and featured in 11 episodes of the show, just shy of Wild Thing and Terahertz. The team's introduction interview in Extreme 1 is burned into the minds of viewers from the number of times it played. The Series 7 campaign is one of Steel Avenger's most famous aspects, a much publicised return from retirement to reach the heat final and lose in one of the most iconic ooters of all time. It is ultimately this consistency that sums up the Steel Avenger's Robot Wars career, a recurring feature in the show's history which was never quite the whole package in taking that one step further, but with a good string of appearances on the show, a striking design and the team's willingness to join in with the more theatrical segments of the show, it is understandable why many fondly remember the Steel Avenger.
And John and Jackie Willoughby, will they push Stinger in with Steel Avenger? Stinger on the brink and down! Oh, and Steel Avenger follows through and goes down into the pit as well!